My family is cursed. A clown shows up at everyone's 10th birthday, but no one ever hires one. My earliest memory of the clown is from my cousin Jake's 10th birthday party. I was only 5, but I distinctly remember the commotion surrounding the clown. I remember my parents preparing me before we left the house and on the drive there. "There's going to be a clown at Jake's party," my dad said. "Just be nice. All you have to do is be nice," my mom added. I didn't understand why they were so worried, why my mom kept wiping her hands on her dress the entire drive to Jake's house, or why my dad kept taking deep breaths. Weren't clowns supposed to be at birthday parties? When we got to Jake's house, something was going on. The kids were running around the backyard and jumping in the bouncy castle, but the adults were standing around in silence, their eyes darting back and forth across the yard while some of my aunts and uncles walked in and out of the house periodically. It was like they were all waiting for something to happen. As I jumped in the bouncy castle along with the rest of my cousins, I noticed a movement in the bushes near the gate that led into the backyard. I continued to bounce, trying to get higher each time to get a better look at whatever was there. Finally, I saw the clown appear from behind the bushes and watched as he unlatched the gate. I stopped bouncing and tried to maintain my balance as I watched the clown step into the yard and closed the gate behind himself. I pushed my fingers through the mesh in the bouncy castle and pressed my face against it, staring at the clown as he scanned the backyard until his eyes landed on me. He stared at me for a few seconds and I stared back, not knowing what to do. Nobody else seemed to have noticed him yet, and my cousins continued bouncing around behind me. He was short, and he wore a curly, rainbow-colored wig. His face was white, and it seemed like his skin was naturally that pale. It didn't look like paint at all. His lips were normal size, but bright red, and he had a giant, round red nose. His eyes were dark, so dark that I couldn't distinguish the pupil from the iris. He had 2 black lines that started above his black eyebrows and ran down his eyelids to the tops of his cheeks, which appeared to be inflated with something. They were round and protruding, with a pink blush on them. His skin was smooth, like porcelain. He wore yellow polka dot pants that were held up by red suspenders, a white shirt with giant red buttons down the front, and red ruffles around the neck, chest, and sleeves. He wore shiny red clown shoes, and he carried a gift bag in one hand. I don't know how long I stood there watching him, but suddenly, I was being pulled out of the bouncy house by my mom. She dragged me to a table and sat me down in a chair in between herself and my dad. I continued to watch the clown as he approached my cousin Lisa and pulled out a pink balloon from a pocket in his pants. He blew up the balloon and then twisted it into a dog, handing it to her. She took the balloon dog from the clown and ran to her mom, my Aunt Chelsea, who grabbed Lisa roughly and dragged her away from the clown. There was an impalpable amount of tension for the remainder of Jake's birthday party. Our parents wouldn't let us stray too far away, and the clown stayed the entire time, wandering around the yard and handing out balloon animals or honking his nose for the children. When it came time to open presents, we watched as Jake unwrapped countless video games and action figures, along with a few clothing items. Once he finished opening the last gift from a family member, the clown walked up to Jake and handed him the gift bag he had been carrying around for the entire party. I watched as Jake's mom tried to stop the clown from handing Jake the gift, while my uncle held her back. We all watched as Jake thanked the clown and opened the gift bag, taking out handfuls of tissue paper until he reached in and pulled out the gift. "It's a book," Jake said. I saw his mom sigh in relief, and Jake turned the book over in his hands, looking at it. It was a small, hardcover book with a glossy dust jacket that had a drawing of a beach on it. Jake thanked the clown, and it walked away from him, through the gate, and away from the house. Once he was gone, Jake's dad snatched the book from him. I asked him about it later, but he told me his parents had thrown it out. I saw the clown a few times after that. At every cousin's 10th birthday party, he would show up in the same outfit every time and give them a hardcover picture book that their parents would get rid of. When I was 10, the same thing happened, and although I begged my parents to let me see the book, they declined. The night of my birthday party, I snuck out of my room and saw my dad go up into the attic with my book. I tried to find it a few times after that day, but he had hidden it well, and it was nowhere to be seen. I once asked my parents why any of us even had birthday parties if they were so afraid of the clown, but they told me that the clown would show up anyway. He always knew. I didn't see the clown for a couple of years. All of my cousins had passed the age of 10, and none of them were old enough to have their children yet. When I turned 20, my parents died in a car accident and I inherited their house. By that time, I had forgotten all about the clown and the book and didn't care to read it or figure out why they had taken it away. And then about 12 years later, my daughter Wendy had her 10th birthday party. My wife knew about the clown, and we had already seen it appear once before at Jake's twins' birthday party. We had prepared Wendy and had given her the same warnings my parents had given me: be nice to the clown. About 30 minutes into the party, the clown jumped over the backyard fence and wandered over to the table where Wendy and her cousins were getting makeovers. I stopped myself from running over and stopping him. He looked exactly as I had remembered him. Not a single thing had changed, not even his outfit. I watched as he caught my niece Alice's eye and pulled out a blue balloon from his pocket. He blew the balloon up and then pulled out another blue one and then used them both to form a hat, which he gently placed on her head. I watched as she thanked him and he clapped his hands together and then continued to walk around my backyard. Nobody ever tried to stop him because we had always been warned not to. We were never specifically told what would happen if we tried, but we knew it was bad and none of us wanted to find out what it would be. When it was time to open presents, I continued to eye the gift bag in the clown's hand. Once Wendy was done with opening the gifts given to her by family members, the clown approached her and handed her the bag. She took it gently and slowly opened it, digging around the tissue paper until she pulled out the book. "Thank you," she said, smiling at the clown. He took a bow and then walked away, jumping back over the fence. I let out a sigh of relief once he was gone, and I approached Wendy, taking the book from her. She didn't seem to mind that it was being taken. She seemed glad. I decided to hide it in the attic, just as my parents had done with mine, but as I stared at it in my hands, curiosity was beginning to set in. It was the same as all the other books I had seen, hardcover with a glossy dust jacket that contained a drawing on the front, but no title. This one had a drawing of a girl that resembled Wendy, standing in front of a birthday cake and about to blow out the candles. She had the same curly brown hair and green eyes as Wendy. I opened the book and noticed an inscription on the inside of the cover that said, "Happy 10th Wendy." The first page was blank, but the next page was where the story started. There was a drawing of the girl on the cover, wearing a party hat and holding a pile of gifts. Under that, it read, "Today is Wendy's 10th. How happy is she? She got every gift she wanted, even things she didn't need." I turned the page as I continued to read the story that depicted various drawings of a girl that resembled my daughter as she did various birthday party activities. Wendy laughs along with her friends, and all her guests are filled with glee. Wendy tries to sneak a peek at every gift that she receives. There were drawings of Wendy with family and friends, everyone smiling and hugging Wendy. And then, from beyond the backyard fence, comes the best guest of them all. A funny clown, here to have a ball. On that page was a drawing of the clown as it jumped over the fence, grinning. This clown loves to party. And it loves 10th birthdays too. He will never miss a chance to show up where he's due. The next drawing was of the clown in the center of the page, surrounded by black. But this birthday is a bit different. Something big is going to happen. The clown is so excited, this doesn't happen often. I turned the page to see a drawing of the clown running around the party chasing the guests who appeared to be frightened. They'd been drawn with their mouths open and wide-eyed as they ran away from the clown. The clown runs around the yard and pulls something from his pocket. Not a balloon, not a magic handkerchief, but something big and sharp and shiny. The next page had a drawing of a gleaming butcher knife, dripping with blood. A lot of guests must die, but don't worry, Wendy will be fine. The next 4 pages contained various drawings of the clown slaughtering people at the birthday party. Some had their necks sliced open, some were stabbed, and some lost body parts. The clown has had his fun, his job here has been done. Happy 10th birthday to Wendy. He will see you at the next one. The last drawing was of the clown jumping back over the fence, leaving a pile of dead bodies behind him. I shut the book as a chill ran down my spine. I realized why our parents never showed us the books, especially if they were all this creepy, and I wondered why the clown would even give us these books. I decided to do as my parents had done and get rid of the book at the end of the party. As I tossed the book on top of the fridge, I heard the first scream. I ran to the door and threw it open just in time to see everyone running away from the clown. He was back, and he stood right by the fence with a butcher knife in his hands. On the ground next to him was my cousin Paula's child, Trevor, face down in the grass. I scanned the backyard, looking for Wendy, but she was nowhere to be seen. All the guests ran across the yard, trying to get as far away from the clown as possible. I watched as Jake tossed his children over the fence and into the neighbor's yard, followed by his husband and then himself. I looked for my wife, and I spotted her running towards me and into the house. "Where's Wendy?" I asked her, grabbing her arm. "She jumped the fence a while ago, she's fine. We need to hide." She dragged me inside with her as the screams continued. A few more family members made it inside, and we hid in the kitchen and the living room. After a while, the screams died out and I slowly got up, opening the door and peering out into the backyard. "He's gone," I said as I threw open the door and walked outside. There were a total of 10 dead people. And a few minutes after the cops arrived, so did Jake, his family, and Wendy. I ran to her as I saw her coming up the driveway, picking her up into my arms. "I'm so glad you're okay," I said. I kept her by my side for the rest of the night as we answered questions. I didn't tell the police that I knew the clown, as they would never believe my story about the curse. Instead, we all told them that we had no idea who the clown was and that we hadn't hired anyone. Hours later, everyone was finally gone. Wendy had gone to bed, and I went downstairs and helped my wife clean up some of the mess. Once we were done, I grabbed the book from on top of the fridge and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked. "It's what he gave her, Rose," I said as she opened it. "Read it." I waited for her to finish reading the book. Once she was done, she tossed it onto the counter. "What the fuck?" she hissed. "Did he plan all that? Is this supposed to be some stupid joke?" I shrugged. "Did this happen to everyone else?" she asked. "I don't know. Our parents never let us see the books," I replied. "This is so fucked up, David." We stood in silence as Rose grabbed the book again, giving it a disgusted look. I'm gonna go look for something, I said suddenly. I made my way to the attic entrance in the hall and pulled down the ladder. I slowly made my way up, each step creaking as I stood on it. When I reached the top, I flipped the switch and the lights turned on, illuminating the attic enough for me to see. I dug through countless boxes and moved old decor and furniture around until I found it, the book that had been given to me on my 10th birthday. It had been hidden under the cushion of an old chair. I pulled it out and looked at the drawing of a house with a single light on in one of the windows. I opened the book and found a similar engraving on the inside cover that read Happy 10th David. I turned the pages and began to read the story, ignoring the pictures. Today is David's 10th birthday. What a good one it will be. David eats pizza. His favorite topping is cheese. He has a water balloon fight with cousin Eric, and they take cover in the trees. Everything is fun, and soon it will be great. Here comes the clown. He is never late. David's birthday was a blast, and his gifts were all so fun. But don't be sad that it's over. The fun has just begun. Years go by, and the clown sees Dave again. It's now his daughter's 10th birthday, and today the fun will end. A lot of guests had fun, and for others this day was their last. But David's family is alive, thank the clown for that. And now it's time for bed, time to get some sleep. Don't forget to check on Wendy. She hasn't made a peep. The final drawing in the book showed an empty bed in a dark room with a wide open window. I stared at it for a second before it hit me. I tossed the book aside as I got a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something was wrong. Wendy! I shouted. What's going on? Rose called. I didn't reply as I hurried down the ladder and ran down the hall into Wendy's bedroom, throwing the door open. I flipped the light on and looked around the room, but I was too late. She was gone. Her bed was empty, and her window was wide open. I tried confronting a clown. I don't know what I was thinking. It seemed like an innocuous idea. Find one of the clowns, corner it, and find out why they're doing all of this. I would become a media sensation. My findings might have led to blowing the entire clown sensation wide open. All because of my bravery. I'd be a hero. At first, my town seemed to be a sacred land that no clown dared touch. It was a God-fearing, blue-collar town where everyone knew their neighbors and the postman could eat for an entire week thanks to the housewives and their generosity. There was one school, a Baptist-run institution that surprisingly focused more on education than religion. Everyone who has ever lived in the town went to that school, just like everyone here got their first job at the window factory. It was simply how things were. Some call it trite. We called it home. Sure, there was a crime. One time, for example, the little Daxterly's oldest boy lashed out and broke 3 windows at the church. It was all over the news and the papers. People would gossip, of course. However, no one chastised him for his actions. Instead, everyone was supportive and got him the help he needed. I'm not trying to brag. This was just a genuinely pleasant and nurturing community. When the news broke that a clown was seen sitting on the steps of the school the other night, it sent a ripple throughout the town. Everyone had been following the stories, yet no one was concerned about seeing them here. Why would we be? We all knew it was a prank, albeit a stupid one, that would fade away into obscurity. It was chalked up to the Daxterly boy lashing out again, until the next sighting. And the next. Then another. Then 2 clowns together. It wasn't until a dog was found mutilated in the middle of the town center that the population collectively began to panic. Curfews were enforced. Shops closed early. School and church service was reduced to twice a week. Had someone passed through after dusk, they would have found a ghost town. Fear was running the town now. I wanted it to stop. My plan was simple. Every night since the first incident, the clowns have been seen on the school grounds or the church grounds. All I would need to do was stay out of sight of the sheriff while I waited to see a clown. Then, simply run up on it and find out what the hell they're in the town for. Easy. Darkness had finally fallen the night I decided to act. I've never believed in guns, nor in taking a weapon to an unarmed fight, but I have to admit, the hysteria was beginning to grate on me at that point. I went out with a wooden Louisville slugger and a flashlight. It was slightly after 10 p.m., and most of the residents were already sleeping in hopes of seeing daylight sooner. That made it easy for me to avoid the sheriff, as I was able to cut through backyards and hide in driveways when the patrol cars got too close. This was a small town. On a regular night, I could walk to the school in less than 10 minutes, but law enforcement wasn't taking any chances. It took me almost an hour to reach the school, and when I did, I was upset to see nothing waiting for me. Nothing. I posted up in a nearby tree that had a clear view of the front of the building and got comfortable. Something in my gut told me I was going to have a long wait ahead of me. I wish I could say that a few hours into my shift a clown came and I was able to get my answers. I do, but I fell asleep. I woke up on the lawn under the tree to blinding daylight and a gun in my face. The officer was stern and visibly shaken, but nice enough to me. At the station, he gave me coffee and a nice selection of pastries and fruits to choose from for breakfast. In other cities, this might be seen as the buttering up of a suspect to get them to talk, but not here. This was Southern hospitality at its finest. We talked for a while about everything going on with the clown situation. The conversation wasn't focused on my actions as I had expected. The officer was more interested in what my thoughts were on how to deal with this clown situation that was currently paralyzing the town. I think he saw my actions as more brave than incriminating like I wanted. I could still be a hero. After a couple of hours, we agreed on the situation. The sheriff's office would turn a blind eye to any investigations I wanted to conduct alone, even after hours. However, any criminal activity would be penalized to the fullest extent, especially assault. He made it very clear that no matter who was behind this, I wasn't allowed to touch a single hair on their head. It was a reasonable compromise. That night, I returned to my post. It was a lot easier without having to stay out of sight. A simple nod of acknowledgement was the only exchange I had with the officers patrolling the streets. When I made it to the school, I found no signs of life yet again. I climbed the tree and settled in for a long night. About 2 hours into my wait, I still hadn't seen any signs of a clown. My eyes were getting heavier by the minute, so I decided to inspect the grounds and see if I could discover anything indicating a clown might be in the area. When I jumped to the ground from the lowest branch, I was greeted by a tall figure wearing a bright, shiny blue bodysuit that was bedazzled with buttons and patterns. I'd be lying if I said I didn't fall back against the tree, gasping for air. All confidence left my body as my eyes met its face. I had been expecting a porcelain mask, not a white human face with red lips and blue hair staring back at me. The lack of a red nose unsettled me as well. This wasn't the clown I was prepared for. I couldn't move. My body had shut down on me when I needed it most. The clown didn't move, didn't even blink. It just stared at me deeply with bright green eyes and a smile that was permanently affixed on its face. A standoff. After a few more minutes, the clown reached one of its white-gloved hands out to me. I looked to its hand, and then back to those oddly bright eyes without budging an inch. Nothing about the clown had changed aside from its arm. The clown still didn't blink. It still had that fucking smile. It nodded a couple of times towards its hand like it wanted me to grab it. I was confused, but with the hope of humanity being behind the costume, I reached out to shake the outstretched hand. Before I was able to fully lock palms with the clown, I was met with a light shock that radiated up my forearm. I screamed. The clown arched its head back, grabbed its belly, and laughed at me. It sounded like there was a broken squeaky toy lodged in its throat. The electric jolt must have been enough to revitalize my body as I jumped up and shoved the clown away from me as hard as I could. It fell back exaggeratedly, flailing its large white shoes up and sliding on its rear end across the grass. After a brief pause and a look of disbelief, the clown began to silently cry while rotating its fists under its squinting eyes and stopping its heels on the ground. I was annoyed with the dramatics and started yelling at it. Nothing remotely coherent came from my mouth, just a smorgasbord of profanities and blame. Once I relieved my pent-up frustrations, the clown stopped pouting and began its squeaky laugh again, but this time it was accompanied by another noise. A louder noise that wasn't coming from its mouth. The air around me was overtaken by a sound that was similar to a million cicadas clicking in a deep whisper. I couldn't hear the clown in front of me any longer. Everything was overtaken by whatever was making this background noise. I fell back again, grasping my head in pain and attempting to cover my ears. Bang, my heart stopped. I looked up and the clown in front of me was now a Rorschach painting across the grass. My interrogating officer was standing next to me with a shotgun. "Run!" He yelled at me as he grabbed my arm and yanked me to my feet. Surrounding the entire were clowns of all shapes and sizes, walking towards us with their mouths wide open, slightly facing the ground. We barely made it to the station, circumnavigating all the clowns that overtook the streets. It's been 38 days since that incident. We've been barricaded in the station, taking rotating shifts in the camera room. The clowns, they've taken on our everyday lives. We watch them go shopping, walk dogs, go to school and work. It's like they're trying to replace us. The only peculiar thing they do is surround the station at night and laugh in unison. All night, until the sun rises. Then they continue like nothing happened. We've got full utility access here and have been keeping up on the news. We know it's spreading. I fear that my actions that night may have caused them to resent humans. I wanted to be the hero, but I couldn't find a way to stop this. Greenville is gone. Don't let the media fool you, stay away from here. More importantly, don't go near the clowns. No one remembers the clown that came to my 8th birthday party. Like all 8-year-olds, I treated my birthday like the most important day of the year. You go months before the day picking exactly the right classmates to give invitations to. However, this year my mom wanted to go all out. She gave me enough invitations for my entire class, making sure I knew to tell everyone their parents were allowed to come as well. Not only that, but we spent hours upon hours inside of Party City grabbing any kinds of decorations. I can remember not getting a good night's sleep before my party because of how excited I was. My parents woke up around 7 a.m. to start setting up for the party that day, but I must have been awake at least 3 hours beforehand. I can remember bouncing up and down as I watched the first guest pull into our driveway. Jump forward a couple of hours and our house looked more like a circus. Kids from my class, their families, and my family all eating, drinking, and laughing. All of my friends treated me like a celebrity as they all gathered around, begging for me to open their gift first. It almost makes me nostalgic to go back and have one more birthday party as a kid, almost. I don't know when exactly it started. After the first slice of pizza? Maybe after the last guest had arrived. At some point, time just began to become a haze. While I would say I felt as if I was on top of the world, it felt as if at some point, something like a warmth began to spread over me. Starting at my feet, the feeling spread until every vein in my body felt as if it was being filled with cotton. Events just seemed to happen, but I can't recall the order in which anything transpired. It's the reason why I can't remember when it first appeared. Suddenly, I just remember being in front of him. My overanimated cousins and friends all jumped up and down excitedly, their shouts warbled and tainted as the warmth that overcame me morphed into a bizarre feeling of euphoria. A clown almost 7 feet high, no was he taller. My eyesight succumbed to this feeling as well, and everything waved and stretched like I was peering through glasses made of jelly. He towered over all the children. Overalls, a button-down shirt, a pair of oversized clown shoes, and some big puffy gloves. All normal clown attire. But it wasn't wearing bright colors. Every article of clothing he wore was pitch black. So dark that it somehow stood out, if that makes sense. Almost like his clothes were holes in reality. The thing in black danced and twirled, causing the children around him to erupt in applause. Even I was cheering, I could feel myself cheering, but it also felt as if I were hearing myself yell from inside a soundproofed room, muffled and somehow foreign. I can't speak of how long I felt like this. Was it minutes or hours? I remember my body walking around my house, watching everyone mingle. Every turn felt like it was towards the clown. I'd turn left and he'd be sitting at a bench, talking with an adult. I'd turn right and he'd be applauding as a young cousin of mine swung wildly at a piñata. I'd back up and I'd bump into him looking down at me, arms outstretched as if he was looking for a warm embrace. Its face was always hidden behind a mask. A chrome mask perfectly resembling the smile of a human. But nothing about the entity seemed human. There were no eye holes in the mask. Just 2 swirls cut into its surface. A brilliant light unlike anything I've seen since gleamed from the swirls. Every time I think about it, I feel my hands tingle, even to this day. It was ever present anywhere I looked. Was there more than one? Was I seeing things? The more I moved, the more off-putting and nonsensical the scenes would become. One moment I was watching the clown twist balloons into animals, and the next, that balloon animal would be biting away at a happy and willing kid, blood covering the animal's head. One second I'd be watching people talk, enjoying food at the party, and the next they'd be stabbing food-covered plastic utensils into each other, all the while smiling, even when those utensils pierced their faces. No matter what I saw, the warm feeling that encompassed my body only made me feel blissful. What I remember clearest was somehow stumbling into my house. Perhaps in a desperate escape to escape the never-ending mind fog, or perhaps it was the call of something unknown. I walked into my family's kitchen and felt the state of my confusion climax. The best way to explain this transition would be if I had been wading through a kiddie pool and suddenly dropped into a deep end. I walked into the kitchen to see the clown in black cradling the bodies of two of my classmates. Not just their bodies, but their entrails. He held both of them, one in each arm, and rocked them gently. Both had been disemboweled, their entrails wrapped around them like macabre swaddles. With the carnage in front of me, I should have been afraid for my life. I should have screamed, should have run. Instead, I could only smile. It felt as if what I was seeing was the most beautiful thing I had laid my eyes on. I could only walk closer. I felt a pain spread across my face as my face moved to form a grin far wider than it was capable. My skin stretched gaunt over my face, my eyes pulled unnaturally open. Tears forming but not flowing. My eyesight faded in and out until the morbid scene in front of me disappeared. The next thing I know, I'm hanging from a tree. I looked up and hundreds of strands of party string were around my hands, tying me to a branch. All around me, my friends and family all cheered and pointed me. I look over the crowd, some covered in blood, some actively bleeding from several wounds. In front of the crowd stood my parents. My dad had his face painted in blood. My mom was smiling, but where her eyes should have been were two gaping holes, leaking a thick rainbow fluid. They hug and smile at me as I feel two icy hands wrap around my neck. I feel them squeeze, tighter and tighter. Like a shadow, the thing in black shifts into my vision, its hands around my neck. I can't breathe, but I stay conscious. I'm smiling, wider and wider, staring into the clown's face. That chrome mask reflects my happy expression. The glow from those spirals overtook me. I can feel myself slipping somewhere. Is it my mind? And I am sliding somewhere. I feel the clown's grip tighten and tighten until it feels like my neck is the size of a pipe cleaner. And then I'm in my room. No feeling of confusion and euphoria, just me. I'm standing in front of my window and the sun is rising. I remember everything, but it feels like I'm recalling something that happened years ago. I smell breakfast, the sweet smell of bacon in the air, and run downstairs to see my parents in the kitchen. The cleanest the kitchen has ever been, minus the cooking ingredients scattered around the counter. My mom turns to me smiling. Her face is uninjured like it usually does. She tells me she hopes I enjoyed my party yesterday and that breakfast will be ready in just a bit. I nod but turn and run to the window overlooking our backyard. I can see a few party streamers here and there, but other than that, the backyard has been completely cleared. Was it a dream? Surely it was. But if it was all a dream, why did it all feel so real? As I eat breakfast with my parents, I ask where they got the clown from. They look at each other and then back at me. My dad exclaims that they didn't get a clown for the party yesterday, but if I want one next year, I would just have to ask. My heart jumped, but I tried to push everything aside and not think too far into it, but then I noticed it. A dark spot in the middle of my vision wherever I look. I wipe my eyes trying to get rid of it, but it stays. I told my mom and she made an appointment with my eye doctor on Monday. When we get there, the doctor says I have something called solar retinopathy. Says I have a small hole burned into my retina like I've been staring at the sun or into a bright light. Suddenly the image of that chrome face with glowing spirals for eyes pushes itself to the forefront of my mind. I tell myself over and over that it was a dream, but I know it wasn't. From my permanently damaged vision to my two missing 8th grade classmates who were never found. The same two I'd seen that thing cradling. I know it wasn't a dream from the injuries and scars I see on some of my friends and family who were at my party. I'd ask them where they got the scarf from, and they simply go blank for a minute before saying they can't remember. I'm 28 now, and I've started seeing him again. It only happens on my birthdays, but he's always there. Always at the far ends of my peripheral vision, but always there nonetheless. That clown in black. The clown in the church. I can still remember the first time I saw the clown in the church. I was 14 and my family had moved to a house in the town where my mother had grown up. Across from our house was an old church, and through one of the side windows, I saw it. A clown. Now when I say a clown, I don't mean some weird dude dressed up hiding out somewhere waiting to scare any passerby. No. It was one of those animatronic ones people put out around Halloween. I couldn't make out many of its features because I was at a distance to start with, but from where I was standing I could tell it was fake. My mom saw what I was looking at as we both stood next to the car parked in our driveway. You know, when I was a little girl, that was the church I went to with Grandpa and Grandma, she said. Why is that clown in there? I spoke not to ignore what she had said, but more wanted an immediate answer to my question. My mom laughed a bit as she answered, who knows, probably just forgot it there after Halloween. Somebody playing a dumb joke. Come on, help me take these things in. We finished unloading the car, being joined by my older brother Steve, who had gone in ahead of us. Now I love my brother, but he could be a real dick. It wasn't long before he spotted the clown as well and laid into me. Oh, he's been waiting for you, Mark. He'll come when you're asleep, he said while raising his arms in an attempt to frighten me. It didn't work. At least that's what I told myself at the time. Asshole, I said under my breath. Mark. I heard my mom's voice from inside the house. I swear the woman had superhuman hearing. Later we had takeout for dinner and I got to bed. School was already starting the next day and I was tired from the drive and unpacking so far. When I got home from school the next day, I was alone at the time. Mom wasn't back from work yet and Steve was nowhere to be found. I was about to let myself in when I looked back over at the church. The clown was still there. But it wasn't where it had been the day before. It was standing in front of the middle window now. It had moved. I walked across the street and got a better look at the clown. Still to this day, I don't know what compelled me to do it, plain curiosity I suppose. I couldn't help but remember my brother's words from the other day. He's going to get you, Mark. It was evident the church had been through some rough times. Its white paint was faded, dirty, and chipped off everywhere. The 3 arched windows that were facing me all looked neglected and like they hadn't been cleaned in years. The inside had been hollowed out with no pews or any other furniture remaining. Then my focus shifted to the clown. It was about my height, 5 feet 7 inches or 5 feet 8 inches, with a suit of rainbow-style alternating red and white stripes that shined like silk in the daylight. It wore a white boa around its neck with 3 large red pom-poms in front with massive ruby red shoes covering its feet. Its face and hands were gray and looked like they'd been fashioned out of modeling clay with bumps and wrinkles all over. Its scraggly red hair exploded out the back of its head except where it was bald on top. And it had a piercing stare to its jaundiced yellow eyes. Like it looked right into my soul. It stared and smiled with its mouth full of square teeth. It wore a cardboard sign on its chest with words that looked like they'd been written in red marker. The words said, "Hug me." A single thought went through my mind at that moment. Why the hell would anybody leave this in a church? I had had enough exploration for the day and walked back home, not even looking back once. I spent the rest of the day watching TV and doing what little homework I had. Mom got home not long after, and so did Steve. I tried not to think about the clown that night, but even as my eyes started to feel heavy, its repulsiveness swelled in my mind. The next day, while I was waiting for the bus to pick me up, I stole a glance over at the church. The clown had moved again. This time it was in the window closest to the church's front door. It had to have been Steve doing it. It was just like that asshole. Soon the bus arrived and I sat in a random seat, staring out the window at the church. At the clown. I spent most of the day at school distracted. And I was pissed. At Steve. Later on, I was waiting for Steve when he got home. Mom had picked him up. "So you think you're so funny, huh? You and your stupid friends?" I said. Steve glanced at me before speaking. "I don't know what the hell you're talking about, weirdo." My mother stood there silent as I spoke. "I'm talking about the damn clown. You keep moving it, trying to scare me." I pointed towards the living room window in the direction of the church. Steve started laughing as my mom joined in. "Okay, I don't know what's going on, but it just needs to stop. You both are getting too old for this." She pointed at Steve as he continued to profess his innocence, and soon after he made his way upstairs. I could feel tears forming in my eyes at that point, mostly out of anger and frustration. I went to say my piece, but my mom didn't want to hear about it. "It's just a stupid clown. Now go get cleaned up for dinner," she said. The next few days passed without any extra excitement. School went by quickly, and I'm guessing my mom must have talked to Steve because the clown hadn't moved anymore. It wasn't until Friday after school that I noticed something was different again. I had gotten off the bus when I did what now had become routine for me. I looked over at the church and I saw the clown, still in the same window. But even from the edge of my driveway, I could tell something had changed. I cautiously walked over, and as I got closer, the differences stood out even more. It looked a full foot taller, maybe more so. Its once normal legs now looked like long stilts. And its arms and fingers looked like they'd grown, with its wrists and knuckles bent at odd angles, now pointed at the window. But its face was the worst part. Its eyes looked wider and its teeth more knife-like and pronounced. My subconscious brain was picking up all of it. It looked meaner. A very real chill ran down my spine and I turned with haste to make my way back home, never looking back once, even as I slammed and locked our front door shut behind me. I decided to stay up that night and watch the church. Watch the clown. If my brother was pulling off some elaborate prank to mess with me, then I had to know. I had to catch him in the act. I faked going to bed and sat down quietly by my window. Even in the dim lighting of the night, I could still make out the shape of the clown. I knew Steve was already in his room, and that Mom would soon retire for the night after a glass of wine and some bad sitcom TV. All I had to do was wait it out. I don't know what time I had fallen asleep, nor did I remember laying down on the floor up against my bedroom wall. I woke up slowly with my head in a semi-daze, and I instinctively peered out the window. It took me a few moments to focus, but then I saw something that immediately sent me into panic mode. The front door to the church was open, and the clown was nowhere to be seen. I went to get up when I heard a noise that sounded like stairs creaking. The steps that lead to our upstairs did creak, albeit not enough to wake someone up if you knew where to step. My first thought was maybe my mom had stayed late and was finally making her way up. I hadn't checked the actual time yet. Then I heard it again. And again. Someone was coming up the stairs. Then I heard another sound that made me question who it was. The noise was like fingers being lightly dragged slowly along the wall. And they were close, right on the other side of my bedroom. I pressed my ear to the wall as silently as I could to hear better. I could still hear footsteps, heavy but yet somehow still eerily quiet in the dead of night. Somebody was trying very carefully not to be heard. Not Mom, Steve, and then the footsteps stopped. I sat, ear still pressed to the wall. A few silent seconds passed. What is he doing? Soon I could make out another distinct sound. The doorknob to my room was being turned. I sat there on the floor, my gaze now focused and eyes better adapted to the darkness. I could see the knob being turned and my bedroom door being inched open. Then came heavy breathing, and I could make out the horrible, wretched face of the clown peeking in at me. I did the only thing my body would allow me. I screamed. M.O.M. The next few moments were a frenzy of activity. My mom's bedroom door flew open at the same time my bedroom light was flipped on. In the flood of light, I saw the clown. No, I saw a clown mask on top of a black Metallica t-shirt. And then Steve took the mask off and erupted into laughter as I've never heard before. Oh man, you should have seen your face, Steve said. Mom barged in behind him. What the hell is going on? Stephen, she said while glaring at him with an intensity I'd only witnessed a couple of times before. What? It was a joke, he said. Look at his face. He practically shit himself. Get out and go to bed. We'll talk about this tomorrow and whether I'm going to ground you for life or not, Mom said. Steve walked out, his laughter silenced with the clown mask hanging limply from his hand. My mom didn't say anything else to me except to go to bed and then closed my door. I distinctly remember standing there in place for a while before moving again as the house once again went silent. I looked out the window one more time before surrendering to my bed. The church door was still open, swaying in the nighttime wind. The clown was nowhere to be seen. After that night, I never saw the clown again. As time went on, I eventually accepted the fact that the whole thing had been a trick by my brother and one or two of his friends. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed silly to me, being so afraid of something that couldn't possibly have hurt me. But still, I was always a little skittish around any clowns, whether they were human or robotic. I secretly dreaded when Halloween came around despite my attempts to appear otherwise enthusiastic. Over the years, it became kind of a running joke in my family. That was at least until I got a call from Steve yesterday. He didn't sound like his usual happy self. Sometimes he'd call asking me for money, or just to shoot the shit. But one way or another, he'd always managed to bring up the clown incident like it had just happened yesterday. But not this time. This time he sounded downright spooked. This time he went right into bringing up the clown. Hey bro, why you remember that whole clown thing from years back? He said it with a tone like we had never talked about it before. Yeah, it's kinda getting old, don't you think? I said. Well, it's just there was something about that night I never told you before. He said. Never told me what? I was waiting with breathless anticipation. That night after you and Mom went back to bed, I snuck back out over to the bathroom. I could have sworn I saw something move ahead of me before I came into your room, he said. There was silence from his end. I could sense this was hard for him to talk about, but I had to know. What was it? I said. It was hard to see because it was dark and I had put the mask on already. but I swear I saw someone go into the bathroom. I thought maybe it was Mom, but the bathroom light never went on and I never heard the door shut. I had the phone pressed so hard to my ear it hurt, and my heart started to race in my chest. What he said next made my chest feel heavy. So I went back later and checked. The bathroom window had been opened, and when I turned the light on I saw something on the floor. There was another moment of silence before he spoke. It was a red pom-pom. It couldn't be. Why are you telling me this now? Steve sounded like he was on the verge of crying as he stammered. I saw it last night, in the alley behind my apartment. It was just standing there. God, it looked 10 feet tall. And it was wearing a sign. No, it said hug me. A demon clown just crashed my birthday party. I told my parents I didn't want a clown for my birthday party. If they'd only listened, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Maybe all those people wouldn't have died. Why doesn't anybody ever listen to me? I told them I wanted a magician and they wound up booking a pretty decent one. But halfway through his act, the clown showed up anyway. My dad could be heard at the front door, shouting at him at first. No, we didn't order a clown. I just called for an estimate. Get your big foot out of the door and let me close it, will you? I went over and peeked around the corner to see a very tall bald clown, his entire head painted with chalky white paint. It was caked on and peeling. Streaks of red were around his lips and eyes, and he wore a mostly plain white clown suit with a few red embellishments, fuzzy buttons, a crimson boutonniere, and a bow tie. He looked terrifying. My dad's eyes were wide and afraid, and he was using all his force to try and close the door by the looks of it. Then the evil-looking clown squirted some liquid out of the red flower on his lapel and hit my dad square in the face. He immediately spit it out and sputtered, trying to say something. Then his face went blank and slack, and he stood back from the door, holding it open. The clown sauntered in right past him, shoes squeaking loudly as he walked. At the other end of the living room, the magician was attempting bravely to continue his act, even though my dozen or so friends had lost all interest and were now fixated on the commotion happening by the front door. The clown marched in just as he was doing the reveal on an extensive card trick. As he was flourishing the Queen of Spades in the air, the clown began to pull things from his pockets, distracting all the children. A balloon giraffe, a pogo stick, a handkerchief that seemed to go on and on forever. Excuse me, sir. I was right in the middle of my act. You can't just come barging in here and interrupt everything like you own the place. The clown's eyes flicked over to the magician, and I noticed now that the irises were a crimson red color as well, just like his bow tie and face paint. I already knew something was wrong, but that drove it home, and I started to get up, wanting to run to a phone and call 911. What happened next froze me in my tracks, and I found myself incapable of doing anything but staring. From the oversized pockets of his suit, the clown pulled out a miniature chainsaw. He pulled the cord, and the room filled with the rusty buzzing sound of it. Hold this for me, will ya, pal? He threw the chainsaw at the magician, and it spun through the air, landing square in his chest. There, the chainsaw grabbed onto his shirt and began to buzz and cut into his clothing, and then into his flesh, as if it were a possessed piranha going in for the kill. The magician screamed and pulled at the thing, putting his hands clumsily into the blade without thinking, only trying to make the pain stop. His fingers were a bloody ruin as he howled and pulled at the chainsaw desperately, but soon it had burrowed into his sternum and his heart, causing him to keel over, dead. The chainsaw continued its high-pitched buzz from inside his chest, and his corpse quivered up and down with it inside of him, still sawing away. "All right, who's the lucky birthday boy?" the clown howled, laughing. "I want you to come up here for a special surprise." My dad was standing glassy-eyed nearby, and he pointed at me, seeming hypnotized. All of my friends were huddled on one corner of the couch, screaming. It's his birthday." The horrible clown's gaze fixed on me, his head tilting slightly as he took me in. "Get over here, birthday boy. It's your lucky day." He lifted his index finger and curled it inwards, beckoning me to come closer. I found myself doing just that, despite my intense desire not to. I ended up standing next to him in the living room, my friends sitting around watching, my dad looking on admiringly. "What's your name, innocent one?" "Jordan." The clown bent down and whispered in my ear, "What do you want for your birthday, Jordan?" "More than anything else in the world?" I thought hard about it. In retrospect, I should have just wished for him to go away. But strangely, that thought did not occur to me. Suddenly, as I looked into his crimson-colored eyes, I felt greed overtake me. He was offering me whatever I wanted, so I would take it. A turtle. I've always wanted a turtle. He grinned, his brown and yellow teeth showing, grimy and stained. "A turtle, you say?" I nodded. "Well, why stop there? How about 2 turtles? Or maybe 3 or 4? What do you say? I'll just make you 5 turtles. They can be your very special friends?" I found myself jumping up and down, a smile stretched wide on my face. But suddenly I didn't feel excited. I felt nervous again, scared, and worried about what he was going to do next. This clown was not going to give me a birthday present I would enjoy. I felt fairly confident of that. The clown pulled a giant cardboard box out of his pants. It was way too large to fit inside his pockets, and that was when I realized he was not from this world. He was from somewhere else entirely. No magician was capable of performing that sort of trick. He pulled a big black marker out of his pocket next and wrote on the side of the box, "Transmogrifier." Then he called up 5 of my friends and had them stand close together, huddled in a circle. "So, you wanted 5 turtles, right?" I shook my head, horrified. It wasn't possible. What he was about to do was impossible. But then he did it anyway. He dropped the big cardboard box down on my friends, and I heard them scream from inside of it. My dad was bouncing up and down, clapping and laughing like a kid, seeming completely unhinged and no longer in control of himself. The clown just giggled and held the box firmly down. Then the screaming stopped and he raised the box. My friends were gone, and 5 cheap-looking plastic turtles were there instead, standing lifeless on the carpet. Their glassy eyes looked sad and confused. "Enjoy your presents, kid." The clown ran over to the magician and pulled his chainsaw from the corpse, disemboweling him in the process, leaving a pile of leaking entrails on the rug. His giant shoes squeaked loudly as he walked out of the house, walking past my mom, who was bringing home pizza for us all. She had only left for 20 minutes, but that was long enough to change our lives forever. She entered the living room to find a pile of gore, a dead magician, and half as many kids as when she had left. The rest of us were screaming hysterically and wouldn't stop for quite some time after that. Fucking clowns are the worst.